Hey guys, I've decided to make this video because there's so much disagreement today over what goth music is and whether or not a band is goth or anything like that. I want to address this primarily because it's just an issue of being able to discern and decide for yourself and figure out on your own whether or not a band is considered goth or not. A lot of this is because there's so much misinformation out there today on what makes a band goth or not. I'm not saying that I'm the goth police or anything like that, but a lot of it is just people haven't taken a lot of time to try and figure it out, and so because of this, a lot of misinformation gets spread. Part of another reason that this happens is that many bands have grasped a goth-like aesthetic without actually being goth. And so because of that, so many people have a false sense of what it is. I mean, I've met people who say Motionless in White is goth. I'm just that hurts inside because that's just so wrong that it makes me want to cry. Anyway, part of the reason that this happens is because gothic itself is such an umbrella term. It encompasses so many different things. And because of this, so many different bands that fit into goth have to fit into this little category under the umbrella. And it's really hard to be 100% goth without some other kind of influence, primarily because gothic itself emerged from post-punk, and it's always going to have influences from post-punk. I mean, that you can't deny that. But it's because of this umbrella that there are so many problems, because a band is going to have influences from the other side. And so oftentimes that requires you to have an opinion about how it's going to form as a band, and these opinions are what cause people to be all mean to each other and pointing fingers saying, that's goth, that's not goth. And when you have this umbrella, a lot of times the easiest thing to do is to be one of two ways. And one of them is, nothing is goth other than Bauhaus and the Batcave in London, nothing else at all whatsoever. Only things that are goth are from that time period and blah blah blah, and Peter Murphy, nah, 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 nah. That's one way to do it. And the other way to do it is everything is goth, mostly, or could be, with Marilyn Manson and all those fake outs. Nothing against Marilyn Manson, but he's not in the gothic culture. He's not a gothic musician. He's just not. And that, a lot of people make that mistake because they look at purely the aesthetics, just the things that don't really have everything to do with the band being goth. The main thing I would like to get into is that normally these mistakes are made because people will mistake goth, they'll mistake either post-punk or industrial for being goth. This is a big problem, but it's an easy mistake to make because gothic itself, of course, emerged from post-punk. Pretty much everybody knows that. And then goth was so much a part of the 80s experimental time period for music that they had a lot of synth goth. In fact, that's one of the categories that I'm going to go into. But they had so much to do with the experimental underground and electronic experimental music of the 80s that it's easy to see how a lot of times post-punk and industrial, two opposite ends, two very different kinds of music, they're bands within post-punk and industrial that get put in the mix with goth, they get shoved under the umbrella of goth, that people often mistake them. First, I would like to go into with post-punk. Okay, I'm probably going to get crucified for this, but The Cure and Susie and the Banshees are not goth. They're actually not. They were definitely crucial in creating the genre for everybody else. They were very influential. They were in my opinion, the most influential post-punk bands to give birth to goth. But just because you give birth to something doesn't mean you actually are that. That'd be kind of creepy. That would mean that my mom and myself are the same person. We're not. I love my mom, but we're not the same person. there are three ways to be able to tell whether or not a band is post-punk or goth. These are just my methods, honestly. They're mine. If you have an issue with them or want to expound upon them, I don't care. Let me know. The first one is time. Post-punk originated, of course, from early 70s goth. Or no, not goth, early 70s punk. What am I saying? Yes, post-punk originated from early 70s punk. Definitely has more of that vibe, more angsty vibe, a little more whiny vibe, in a good way, you know. Bands like Joy Division, Crime and the City Solution, Echo and the Bunnymen, all of those had a significant impact on the birthing of the goth genre. Whereas goth is more 80s and 90s. The 80s and the 90s, I think, were just the epitome of the goth era of the world, and I wish that we could all go back to that time, but that's neither here nor there. Second is sound. Gothic has a very signature sound to it, very shadowy. It has a very signature guitar and bass sound, and also very typical drum sound. If you don't really know what I'm talking about, take a second and look up A Passage in Time by Dead Can Dance or Addiction FFS by Rhombus. Those bands are an excellent way of being able to find out like the goth sound, like a very good representation of the gothic sound. And then if you listen to bands, to songs like The Last Day of Summer by The Cure and Love Takes Me There by Crime and City Solution, those are very good examples of post-punk sound. While you can definitely tell that they do share a lot of similarities musically, they're very different. Gothic has it's more of a graveyard feel. Like if you would listen to it in a graveyard by yourself under the stars, that's very good gothic music. That's a good way of saying and being able to figure out if something's goth or not is, would you listen to it in a graveyard? I know that's kind of stereotypical, probably a little silly, but it's a very simplified way of being able to find out. Whereas post-punk has more of this dirty, dark city feel to it. Kind of like you're walking all by yourself and in the middle of the night, and there's neon signs around. It's kind of dark, and you don't really know where you're going in life. You're kind of depressed, and while they're both nighttime scenes, stars, whatever, in the distance, and probably near cities, they're definitely different scenes, definitely different scenarios. And lastly, aesthetic. The difference the way to be able to tell the difference between goth and post-punk aesthetically, goth has definitely more of the Halloween look. Lace, skulls, black lipstick. Whereas post-punk has more of an indie look to it. If you look at people like Ian Curtis of Joy Division, or even Robert Smith, they wear clothes that today would be worn on hipsters, generally. And so, while aesthetic isn't everything, it's definitely something, because where would art be without covers and art and a face for everything? What would be the purpose without that? It's very important. It's not the most important thing, but it's one of them. And then, secondly, industrial. Complete other end of the spectrum. Post-punk came before goth, industrial came after. They definitely all influenced each other. But a lot of times I hear people say things like, oh, Marilyn Manson's goth, or oh, Skinny Puppy is goth. No. Okay. While I do enjoy industrial, in fact, Skinny Puppy is actually my favorite band, they are definitely not goth. And if you think that they are, we're gonna have to sit down and talk. And keep listening. That might sound really mean, but the ways to be able to tell the difference between goth and industrial is, first off, sound. Honestly, if you need someone to tell you the difference between goth and industrial in terms of sound, please go get your ears checked. Especially if you haven't listened to industrial. If listen to it right now if you don't know what I'm talking about. Industrial is very heavy and abrasive, very angry and angsty, and gothic is very solemn and dreamy. I think the prime difference between industrial and goth is actually not sound, but more of a psychology and a way of thinking about things. Industrial is very angry music, very pissy, very angry at the world, definitely wants to try and fix things. You can definitely hear this if you listen to Skinny Puppy. That's why I like them so much, is actually because they're so driven and they have this passion about, like, making you rethink how you look at things and the whole stream of consciousness way of writing music. It's amazing and excellent, but it's very angry. It's much more angry than goth. Goth's actually it's not very angry. It really is not. In fact, that's actually kind of funny. If you've ever seen South Park and seen the South Park goth kids, that's actually a really good representation of post-punk kids. No offense to post-punk kids at all, or post-punkers or whatever. I don't really hang out with them all that much. But the music of post-punk is actually far more like how the goth kids in South Park think. Anyway, going back to industrial. Sorry, little rant there. The primary difference between industrial and goth is just that industrial, it's just angry. It's very aggressive and very angry. It makes you feel so much more like you want to fix something that's wrong. You either want to fix something that's wrong, or you just want to go get all angry on everybody. And that's how I can tell the difference between Skinny Puppy and Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson, I don't really feel that great when I listen to his music. It just makes me angry and unhappy. Whereas Skinny Puppy makes me motivated and want to change the world, and yeah. But goth is so much more solemn. It's so much more peaceful. It's so much more about finding beauty where there is none. In fact, I think that's where goth actually started, psychologically, with the people who really took it and made it what it is. Because look at what they highlight. There's so much of a highlight of death and other worlds and much more mystical. Those are the kinds of things that previously tended to be very frowned upon or idolized only by, like, Poe and Lovecraft fans. Is that the gothic music took that to another level. It made it into something that was an entire culture. It took things like death and despair and found the beauty in it without making it masochistic. That made it something that showed that while there are all these horrible things, there are things to be celebrated at the same time. A really good representation of that is Bauhaus, honestly. They're such a good band. But they took old-fashioned artwork, like, of course, Bela Lugosi's dead. I mean, how can you mistake that? It's this old 1930s vampire movie that was supposed to be one of the original horror movies, is one of the original horror movies. Probably scared the crap out of people in the 30s. I don't know. I obviously didn't live back then. But they took a movie that was supposed to be, like, dark and evil and scary, and their music turned it into something that was beautiful and to be celebrated. The bats have left the bell tower, you know? It's, how do you not, at least for me, I can't see how you can't listen to that and not smile. Like, it's enjoyable. Whereas industrial, it's a we're gonna do a fake vivisection on a dog on stage and get arrested for it, and there's a time and place for that. And gothic music just doesn't do that. It's just not what it's supposed to do. Okay, the last thing that I would like to go over are the different ways of classifying gothic music. This is just for my benefit. If you guys, honestly, I'm sharing this because I think it could help other people who try to decide if something's goth or not. There are multiple different ways to try and categorize goth, and these are ones I've developed over the years to try and make, like, put in my own brain little slots. When I hear goth band, I try and put them in one of the slots so that I can try and discover more about them, like be able to put them more into a box in a good way, so that to try and decide whether or not it's goth. Honestly, this was very helpful for me when I first started getting into the culture a long time ago. Not going to go over how old I am. First one I mentioned, of course, post-punk. Like, mentioned that. I don't really consider that to be in the Gothic umbrella. More like it helped make the Gothic umbrella. I already mentioned some good bands, you know, The Cure, Susie and the Banshees, Echo and the Bunnymen, The Psychedelic Furs, Flesh for Lulu, Southern Death Cult, Partly Faithful, The Birthday Party. Very good ones. Highly recommended. The first category that I often will try and decide if a band is a part of is what I call Batcave Goth. Not saying that these bands originally started at the Batcave, but like honest to God, untainted goth music that has little or no outside influence. For those of you who don't know what the Batcave is, the original goth club started in England and London back in the 80s, like late 70s, early 80s, by Ollie Wisdom of Specimen. Yay! But yes, these are bands that I consider to be some of the most untainted and excellent goth bands. Very good ones. Of course, there's Bauhaus. That's Bauhaus. Play Dead, Ex-Mala Deutschland, Fields of the Nephilim, The Mission, Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry, Skeletal Family, Two Witches, Blood and Roses, The March Violets, 13th Chime, Sisters of Mercy, Lords of the New Church, Corpus Delicti, The Dance Society, and Lacrimosa. Those are some definitely excellent bands to look up if you want to find like the goth sound, the goth feel in terms of music. And then the second category that I often look at is death rock. Death rock is different from like original rigid goth because death rock was originally from the United States, especially from Los Angeles, like the Western area. These bands were more influenced by the B-movie horror, destruction and sci-fi, things like that, things of that nature. Or like if you're like me, you're like a big fan of B-movie horror movies and things like that. You can definitely see that influence in these kinds of bands. And some really good death rock bands are ones like Alien Sex Fiend, Christian Death, Community FK, 45 Grave, Shadow Project, The Gun Club, The Flesh Eaters, Voodoo Church, Pompeii 99, and UKDK, Specimen, and Bloody Dead and Sexy. Now, not all of those are, of course, from the US, but it's a definitely unique sound that is different from the more rigid goth sound. It's got more of a futuristic vibe to it, especially with like Alien Sex Fiend, of course. Like there's this scary horror, almost futuristic look, like a feel to it that bands like Play Dead don't have. Not saying they're any better or worse, just different. And then synth goth, which is often the confusion with industrial. Whenever I look up Clan of Zymox, a very good synth goth band, it always brings up like 9 Inch Nails and like I don't know what these people are smoking sometimes. But yeah, synth goth. This is of course primarily electronic, definitely birthed from the experimental sounds that emerged during the 80s with electronic music. Bands like this, of course, Clan of Zymox, The Frozen Autumn, Curly and Camera, Nosferatu, She Passed Away, and Trust. These are some very good ones that I like. Clan of Zymox and She Passed Away and Curly and Camera, I think I listen to those pretty much every day. Definitely good driving music, you know, or good walking music. I like a lot of electronic sounds, so this is stuff I like a lot. And then dark wave goth. Dark wave, it's more melodic, more pretty, more beautiful. Like it's the kind of thing that you would listen to at night, or well, all this you would listen to at night. But the kind of thing that's much more centered on a beautiful, more melodic sound, very pretty, very easy to listen to. Some good dark wave bands are ones like Dead Can Dance, probably one of my favorite bands. Mephisto Waltz, Feeding Fingers, Faith in the Muse, This Mortal Coil, and Diary of Dreams. These are some very good dark wave bands. Very good to listen to. And like I said earlier with Dead Can Dance and A Passage in Time, I think Dead Can Dance is what really got me into the Gothic culture. I started listening to a lot of course, A Passage in Time, the ubiquitous Mr. Lovegrove, East of Eden, The Trial, Threshold. Those are some of the best Dead Can Dance songs, and I remember listening to them and just being like, this is so pretty! This is so nice! Like, this is what it's about! Oh my word! This is gorgeous! And ever since I listened to those songs a lot, and started really listening to a lot of Dead Can Dance, I've had no problem differentiating, like, the different Gothic types. Not sure if there's a reason for that. I don't know. But then lastly, I promise this is the last one. Modern Goth. This is more eclectic, more, like I said, of course, more modern. And they're more eclectic because they have more influences from all these bands in the past that have already gone before them. A lot of these bands are from, well, started a lot of them in like the early 90s, after the original two waves of goth. Some of my favorite modern goth bands are Grooving in Green, Red Sun Revival, Rhombus, The 69 Eyes, and Incubus Succubus. These are some really good bands, and a lot of them have more of a rocky feel to them. Not so much Rhombus, but definitely The 69 Eyes and definitely Incubus Succubus. I like these bands a lot. In fact, you can probably see I've got The 69 Eyes right here. So awesome! But yeah, those are some great examples of goth bands to look up. And also just keeping all of it in mind to keep all the different ones separate, keep the categories in mind. Industrial's over here, very different. Post-punk's over here. Goth's kind of in the middle, time period-wise. And so just keeping all of that straight and making notes on sound, appearance, aesthetic, all these different things will really help in deciding whether or not a band is goth or not. So if you have any questions or anything you'd like me to expound upon, keep talking about, or anything at all that you're curious about with the music, just let me know and whatever. Yeah, keep it goth, guys.